Now, today's webinar is presented by Meredith Collins from Video Social Marketing, with vast experience in the public sector, corporate world, adult education and training. Meredith is well placed to support organisations to position themselves in and utilise the social mediums as part of their marketing plan for business profits. Recently, she has been a TAFE New South Wales leader mentoring and training teachers in a range of educational institutions to better implement technology in their classes. She was also chosen to be the Commonwealth Bank and by the Commonwealth Bank and Peter Switzer to travel Australia in the first half of 2012 to support and educate business owners in the use of social media through CBA's annual local business banking forums. I'd now like to pass the microphone on to Meredith.
Thank you so much, Karen, for that generous introduction, and it's great to see so many people here and taking an active interest in how social media can support your organisations. And I have to say that my auspicious career in social media actually started at TAFE New South Wales in around 2002 or 2003, and since that time, obviously we've come a long way, a very long way. So without further ado, let's get started. And we look here at the slide, where to start. And I think that it's really important that you start with your outcome in mind. It's all too easy to go into social media without a plan, and I understand, having been involved in government organisations and actually just won a contract to work with one starting in September, that it's all too easy to go into it and not be really clear on what you're looking to achieve. But of course, in your enterprises, what your outcomes are critical, and of course we're all only as good as our KPIs and meeting our KPIs. So I think it's important to say right up front that get very clear on those outcomes, and if cost-saving KPIs are important or market penetration is important, then we've got to look at how you measure that. All too many businesses go into social media with no ability or no thought about how they're going to measure what they're doing, and sometimes the measurement can be as simple as using tools, so spreadsheets, and having a look at hits on website and interaction and engagement. Other times we're going to be looking at developing more complex KPIs that look at whether we're saving money in traditional advertising, or where social sits in relation to traditional media. So start with the end in mind. What is it that you're looking to achieve? I've got a couple of little Dell things popping up, so just get rid of those. Okay, so I think what it's important to recognise is that social media is no longer about nerdiness. And when I first started using social media, let's say back in 2003 or 2004, I was with bleeding edge technologists who did Doc Martens to conferences, and their butts were hanging out of their Levi's, and they had their long hair, and they'd rather be in a room full of motherboards than in a room full of people. And I used to trot along in my designer dresses and shoes, and they ended up nicknaming me the poster girl for TAFE New South Wales. And so I went along, and it was all very interesting and exciting, but I actually felt very out of place. And then one day it really struck me that using blogs and wikis, and this is in the very early days of social media, and when the only people using social media were the military, educators and the adult entertainment industry. Let's just make that really clear. So back then, I started to realise that we could have distant students, or students who were coming in from interstate, or if they were overseas, that they could continue to connect with us via social media, particularly blogs and wikis. And so over a very short period of time, I started to realise that it wasn't about being nerdy, it was about connectedness. It was about relationships, and it was about opening up those relationships. And in 2005, when I saw streaming video for the first time, this was before YouTube, it blew my mind. And I started to integrate streaming video into our e-learning platform so that students who are logging in from home could still have a piece of me as their teacher or their facilitator, and that they could see what was going on in classrooms. And you know what? Nothing's changed. That's still very much about what social media is. It's about connectedness. And with that, it's important to recognise that the concept or the philosophy of social media has not changed since we lived in the cave, that people have always wanted to be connected. They've always wanted to be connected to something greater than themselves. They've wanted to follow leaders. They've wanted to be part of a community. They've wanted to be heard. They've wanted to have their say. And so social media actually gives us massive access, or gives people massive accessibility that unlike we've had before, so that we can include the greater community and they can be part of something bigger than themselves, and no longer are we dictated by a geographic location. So I'm probably not telling you anything that you don't know, but I think it's important to really recognise that this is not new. It's just a new channel. I get very excited. So when I get very excited, I'll just get Gavin to give me the flag and tell me to settle down. So I think it's also important to say that we have a number of strategic alliances, and so the information brought to you in this webinar is not just information that I have or I've found or I've had access to. Fifth Quadrant is a consulting agency that work at a very high level with particularly government organisations and enterprise to support customer service levels. And so a lot of the information that I bring to you here is research that they have done and they've actually seen within social media circles. So I give credit where credit is due. We also work very closely with another agency that specialises in community engagement. And of course, community engagement has very much shifted from offline to online. So just to be transparent about where that information is coming from. So now to the guts of it. Here we go, models. And I know being in government, you'll love a good model. So there are 4 specific ways, but there are really 2 overarching ways in which social media can be used. And while we tend to think of social media as external and to the organisation and external opportunities of the department or the enterprise that you're within, it's not always the case. Essentially, we have social media that can be utilised internally and social media that goes out to the greater community. So let's just touch on internal social media, because probably you're all doing this as well at some level. It's internal social media is the sharing of internal organisational documents through internal collaboration sites such as SharePoint portals or internal wikis or discussion boards or forums. And as this is and what I think it's important to recognise for government organisations is that government organisations have significant control over internal social media. And let's make it very, very clear up front that internally control is great, externally you're not going to have that level of control. And social media is not about control. Social media is really about facilitation. So for some businesses, maybe an internal social media system is a great place to start, but really I think we're probably here about the external social media system. Just an aside on the internal social media systems, we've actually seen quite recently some gamification coming into internal systems that are linked to people's KPIs and productivity. And it's interesting to see that with some gamification, and particularly with a younger workforce coming through our ranks, that incentivising employees and using these games as engagement strategies are working very well. And we are talking about digital natives and Gen Y to a very large degree here, and productivity gains are significant. So that might be something that you, as an organisation, want to think about, linking some kind of gamification to KPIs and productivity. But let's talk about external sharing, because this could be about sharing with other departments that you work with, and not necessarily information for public consumption, rather information that might be shared through an intranet. So realise that there are many types of social media, but the social media I think you're probably interested in is external sharing, about engaging externally with the community, and this can happen through general engagement with the community, promotion of events, blogs, sharing how your funds are being spent, status updates on an area or a project. You know, I think as a constituent, we all understand that projects run over and that things run late and that contingencies happen. I think what often happens is that information doesn't come out to market, and so constituents don't know what's happening, yet they're inconvenienced by roadworks or they're inconvenienced by stuff that's happening within projects. So social media gives you such a great opportunity to be seen to be really savvy in communicating and open to feedback. It's also an opportunity for you to conduct research and ask for feedback on particular issues, causes or events, and the opportunities for you to collect data and interact with the community is significant. The data mining opportunities to help organisations plan is really quite incredible, and I think that that's going to be a whole new market that opens up. There are very specific ways to do that that we don't have time to cover here, but be aware that we can do that. You know, my family and I recently headed up north to the Northern Tablelands for a holiday. I'm not quite sure why we called that a holiday, but we did. And I actually went to the local council's website to have a look at what was happening in the area, and it was a very, very poorly put together website. So I decided to go into social media to see if I could find some more local, more updated and current information. And I've got to say I was sorely disappointed by their social presence, that not only were there a number of complaints on the Facebook page, they had not been addressed. And so you need to realise that people have shifting the way that they buy. We research, we look for information, and a lot of the risk is not in people having a go or spraying your organisation and wanting to be angry and upset. A lot of the risk lies in organisations not having a plan to manage feedback that comes in. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but recognise that people are looking to your organisation for information, and you've got to be prepared to manage that. We've seen in recent times, during times of crisis, how effective social media has been, and quite often it hasn't been through great planning. It's just that the community has really taken over. You know, the bushfires in Victoria and the floods in Queensland, social media played an incredible role in supporting people both during those crises and afterwards. So it can be very powerful for community engagement and to drive your messages forward. And of course, nothing like the tweets from old Swanstein, as we've seen over the last couple of days, and our politicians. External use of social media can also be seen where our politicians or high-profile people use mediums like Twitter to convey their thoughts, insights, commentary, and probably more importantly, their personality through the social mediums. You know, and people largely vote for and engage with people they like. So this is a great opportunity, a great PR opportunity that the politicians or the high-profile people largely have control of themselves. You know, how they portray in the market. But with all of that said, we should have a plan. There should be plans so that you can manage the process. So governments are traditionally risk averse, and I've seen it all over the place in TAFE. And you know, what we've just covered is great in theory, but most government organisations steer away from the use of social media because of the risk of towards departments, services, or even the people, you know, the politicians. And I think that if the respective ministers start being slandered online, then the word from on high is that we've got to shut it down or shut social media down. What sometimes I think senior executives or people in places of power fail to realise, or you know, they take the ostrich approach, is that these conversations are taking place already. They're happening out there, and I think that it's probably more important to play and to be part of these conversations than to take the ostrich approach and put your head in the sand. It means that we can manage them and head them off at the pass very often. So social media actually provides an opportunity for one, to hear about these conversations, the good, the bad and the unfortunate, and also to address them directly. And we'll talk about risk mitigation a little bit more as we go forward, or actually towards the end of the presentation. So here we're looking at why should we use social media, and I think that any marketing is always about a cohesive marketing wheel and everything turning and driving each other. And in this marketing wheel, we're sort of looking at the channels of communications that are traditionally used by departments, and then some functions for client messaging. So the existing channels that you probably, and the traditional channels that you're already using, will include face-to-face, online inquiry, contact or call centres, which is obviously very expensive, correspondence, letters. I having just set up a new enterprise, I've got to say I don't think I've ever received so many letters as I have in the last week from the Australian government. And online, and our online contacts, which I've just repeated. So then we have the departments that are client-facing, use the areas of a department that can significantly benefit from social media strategy, include general marketing, public relations, public affairs, and general community engagement. And of course, social media fits in beautifully as the newest channel and can potentially be used to support each of the functions above. So, Gavin, have we got any questions that we need to address at this stage?
No questions have come through so far. You seem to be giving all the answers.
Of course, I'm doing my best, Gavin. I'm doing my best. Okay, so enforced change. You know, here we've got a model that talks about key message and digital drivers from keymessage.com, and I think it really sums up beautifully where we're going. And whilst this was built for commercial enterprise, I don't see that government is that much different. You know, approximately 80% of people will research online for information on products or services and subjects of interest before ever making contact with an organisation. I often have people question that statistic, but I want you to think about the way that you buy. What do? Do you Google things, or do you go to the yellow pages to look and get information on what you're going to do? So the majority of people, and whether you're a business to business or a business to consumer or an organisation such as your own, people are out looking for information from you. So you can see in this key digital drivers diagram that social media really forms a cornerstone of the ability for people to access information. But I don't believe social media is a standalone or stands alone in any strategy. It can be a key part of your strategy, but it doesn't stand alone. So the great part about social is that in comparison to websites, they need to be updated, and sometimes this can take time if you're not actually in charge. And I know that there's often layers to get through before websites are changed within government organisations. Social media is a great opportunity to get current information out to market, and very quickly. This is a good opportunity for departments to communicate their messages on the fly. And when you consider that mobile technology is a massive part of our lives today, and that we are mostly carrying computers in our pocket with smartphones, social media is highly accessible through these platforms, and often then social media is more accessible than websites, as many websites are still very 2009 and they're not mobile enabled or compatible with mobile devices, whereas social media is. And given that journalists and people who are influential are also looking for current, up-to-date information and sources, social media gives a whole lot of control over the immediate message going to market. So, in terms of our key messages. So, what are the benefits for marketing? And here we've got the ivory tower. You know, and I think that a lot of government departments often get a spray and are unfairly tarnished, and constituents and your customers and your clients often don't really see the work that your department does, and quite often it's perceived to be out of touch. And this is a really massive issue for government organisations, and I think in many instances it's probably not fair. So social media can really help to change these perceptions for you. Along with currency of information, departments are probably also going to be looking for ways to use social to support community engagement and promotion of the specific department's good work. And from a purely politically motivated standpoint, social can be a powerful way to demonstrate what's being done with taxpayers' money. You know, so well utilised, social media programs can provide enhancement of the department and its reputation in the market. So I think it's important to bear that in mind. And if we look at the benefits for customer experience, you know, we know that you as agencies are under huge pressure with dwindling resources from senior executives and ministers to provide high levels of customer service to the public and to improve perceptions, you know, out in the marketplace. So whilst we absolutely acknowledge that it will, in some departments, take a very brave and courageous soul to implement a social media program and then run with it, I think using social media can demonstrate innovation, in a particularly risk-averse sector, and it may well prove to be very savvy and cost-saving in the longer run. Ultimately, it's the users or the community which has driven organisations to engage through social media. And I do know of a particular department that actually started their social media in direct response to some really bad press that they were getting in the media, and was forced, but it's actually done really great things for them. So I think one of the significant reasons that we are seeing consumers turn to social media for customer service is that it's very convenient, as well as largely it's a great way to be heard. And I know recently I travelled with a major airline, and generally I don't spray in social media, but I was incredibly frustrated by the misinformation and having all my toiletries confiscated and all sorts of palaver that went on. And I tried to ring their customer service centre to no avail. There was, I was on hold for about 20 minutes, which doesn't speak well of customer service. So I tweeted about it, and I was answered within 7 minutes. So that in itself, if that's how I've got to be heard, then so be it. So I think that that's what customers are seeing, that they are being heard more quickly. So by not affording the public a social media channel to communicate through, government or organisations are denying people a level of accessibility that the private sector is absolutely beginning to afford people, and we expect it. So social media can also provide an excellent channel for feedback on service levels and the wider services from the specific departments. And from the point of view of accessibility, if you think about the fact that in 2010, so it's 2 years ago, 93% of homes had the internet. So that is more than we would have ever expected maybe 5 years ago. So purely from the engagement level, social media offers significant accessibility to busy professionals and working people, parents, people living with disabilities. People with disabilities have got a massive uptake in social media because it gives them a voice and it gives them the opportunity to connect, which they may not have had previously. Young people, shift workers who are not necessarily available in working hours to talk to you. We've got more opportunity to engage with these people, and social media can be cost effective and efficient, and all departments are after cost efficiencies. So, you've got to have measures in place though to monitor, measure and respond to feedback in a timely and consistent manner. So Gavin, I think we've got a question there.
I've had a couple of questions come through actually.
Yep.
So first question, what level of training do staff need before posting on social media? Our WordPress blog will be primary feed, but staff may also respond on our syndicated social media.
That's a really good question, because I think that part of the risk is around letting staff loose. And whenever we work with clients, we have a fairly generic computer, internet, email and social media policy that we give to our clients to actually set some guidelines for staff, because of course we want our staff saying great things about us and responding appropriately, but I don't know whether it's necessarily a good idea to let everybody have carte blanche on your social media. So we all perform better when we've got guidelines, or most of us perform better when we've got some boundaries. So I would say that it's also possible to think about having maybe 2 or 3 key stakeholders who actually vet or respond to what's coming through in social media, because you also want to have a voice, create a voice for your organisation, and you've got to decide on what that voice is. Is it a formal? Is it relaxed? Is it something that is friendly? How do you want to be presenting out to the market? And also you want to make sure that your information is consistent. If you've got several staff members responding to social media, then there may be very mixed messages going through. So I would put some real thought. I think that's come from Anne. I think that Anne, I'd be putting some very, very strict thought and some brainstorming with senior management and staff. In fact, I'd engage the staff. I'd let them help you determine a plan for what's going to best work for your organisation. But I'd always make sure that you've got at least a couple of people trained up so that you've got sustainability and capability being built into the organisation.
Well, that actually answers the next question, which was, is it worth having a dedicated member of staff to control social media output for a business?
How good am I?
Yeah, 2 in 1.
How good am I? We should have gone for the hat trick. Look, I think that sustainability and capability in any organisation is incredibly important, but I would always look at having a couple of people, at least a couple of people on the team, because social media, if you've got somebody off sick or somebody's on holidays, or lucky for them, they win lotto and they actually shoot through forever, you don't want to be left in a hole and not have somebody to step into the fold who doesn't understand that voice or start sending inconsistent messages. So I think that we're done.
Do you have, what are some examples of your favourite forms of social media for business?
Oh, that's a very personal question, isn't it, at this stage in our relationship? You know what, I say it's horses for courses, because I don't believe that all social media is right for all business. And look, I'm just going to use the dirty C word, Centrelink. I saw a Facebook page for Centrelink, and I've got to say, it was a disaster. And of course, you've got to think about who your audience is, and maybe you're going to have people there that just spray, for instance, without a lot of thought, and that they've been frustrated in queues. Maybe Facebook is not the forum for every business. I think that blogs are a really powerful way to take messages to market, and they don't have to be so formal. They can be more relaxed, and that they can be keyword rich, and that they can be found in organic search engine searches. So I love blogs, and I'm not particularly camera shy myself, and I really like YouTube, and I think that if we had a bit more YouTube going on in this country, that it would be really good for building rapport and letting our markets connect with us, because remember, it's about relationships, and video is a powerful medium for building relationships. So, but maybe if you're a department that you're largely business to business, and that you've got business development managers or strategic people out in the marketplace, maybe it's LinkedIn that people need to be creating really good, solid, strategic LinkedIn profiles for the department. So that was a bit of a loaded question. Where did that come from?
Meredith, you've kind of done it again. Would you recommend different social media channels for different target markets? Example, business to business versus business to consumer?
Yes, is the short answer. Absolutely. So look, I don't think, I think that social media provides such a great opportunity for you to really engage with your market, but it needs to be the right social medium. The local council that I saw, I really believe that they would be better off not having had a Facebook page, given that it appeared that they didn't have the resources to manage it or run it. And this is exactly the same for corporates as it is for government. You have to look at your human resource, your time resource, and your monetary resource. And sometimes paying the money to have a consultant come in and work with you and mentor, and that's what we do a lot of. We actually go into organisations and mentor them so that we're building capability all the time, and it means that you've got a much more sustainable strategy. So have a look at, if you've got budgets to get social funding, how are you best going to use that budget, both in the short term and the long term?
Great. Well, I think we'll have some more time for questions at the end.
Great. Okay. So, public affairs. Social media can help public affairs divisions to diversify away from traditional methods of information provision, and I think once again it demonstrates currency in the market, and it shows that public organisations are starting to think more about where their markets are and where they're playing. And if you think about the fact that often I hear businesses, and I'm sure government would be the same, where they say, oh, our market's not in social media, our market's baby boomers. Well, baby boomers are retiring, and the fastest growing demographic on Facebook is women over 55, who I am quite sure are stalking their children and grandchildren, and keeping an eye on them that way. But it means that they are in these forums, that they're in these mediums looking. And my dad's in his and he's just enrolled in a computer course. He's been using the computer for quite some time, but he's actually going off to do a bit of a Facebook course just for a bit of fun and tickle or giggles. So don't make the mistake of saying that your market's not there, because there's a good chance that they are. And social media can support and develop relationships in public affairs arena. and develop relationships with a wider range of media outlets who are turning more and more to social media to source information. And interestingly, Fifth Quadrant's research is showing us that 83% of journalists are using social media to help them source information and stories. So probably a really significant benefit for public affairs departments is that social media provides them with a direct-to-end user channel where the media are not in control of what's being published. So Facebook very much acts as their own newsreel, and Twitter is used extensively by journalists for information, particularly if you're using the hashtags, and that's kind of getting really tactical about Twitter, but if you're using hashtags to demonstrate a topic that you're talking about, journalists can really hone in on those hashtags. And so, as discussed earlier, it's a great way to spread information about critical incidents, such as the bushfires or changes to legislation, tax brackets, to high numbers of people at one time. So social media is highly leverageable and can reach the masses for you quickly. So there are many, many benefits of social media, but let's look at some of the aspects that may be holding you back and making people nervous. So I'm sure that it's nobody on this webinar that's having to fight fires with risk, but I think that, as I've said earlier, that a lot of the risk is actually internal to your organisation, so that you don't have solid processes and guidelines in place for staff and what you expect of them if they're in social media. Lynn Fox recently had an event where they sacked an employee for giving them a spray on Facebook, and so I think whoever the government body is that manages unfair dismissal, this employee had a pretty serious go at Lynn Fox on their Facebook page. They did it in their own time, but they very clearly talked about the manager in question. And when Lynn Fox sacked them, the decision came back that there was no social media guideline or policy in place for the staff, so he couldn't have been expected to know not to be inappropriate online. But so you have to cover your bases. So the risks are very often internal, as much internal than they are external. So get those policies and procedures in place. Have a plan. How do we respond? You do not want information left on your social sites that have not been managed from an internal position. So most government organisations do steer away from what we've seen because they are nervous about the negativity. And these conversations are happening either way. So whether your department takes an open approach or the ostrich approach, these conversations are happening. So social media has got to be approached looking to engage with communities in a genuine way. However, we also need to do this in a risk-averse way. So it's important to stress here, and please take note of this, that out of every 1,000 posts, only 4 posts need to be elevated to risk management status. So that should put it in some perspective. Obviously, though, I realise that some departments, that dirty C word again, may be sitting out there saying, well, it's more like 400 posts in every 1,000. So once again, that becomes a risk management. Are we better off to stay out of a medium where we are absolutely going to get into lots of trouble, or do we head that off at the pass and we take it on, face it head on? But either way, no matter what you do or how brave you are, you've got to have those risk strategies in place. So when we work with clients, in conjunction with Fifth Quadrant and our community partner, we take the following 5-step approach and look to tactically implement this. So the 5, there are lots and lots of instances where social media has not been used in a planned manner by organisations and therefore has resulted in widespread negativity. So whether you choose to use consultants or not, this is the methodical approach to develop social media risk strategies that we recommend you take. So the first one is risk avoidance measures, and if you go fast. So risk avoidance measures, how do we actually avoid those risks happening anyway? What are our response frameworks? So, when does something have to be escalated beyond the person who's managing your social media, or does it have to go higher up the ranks? monitoring and tracking processes. So how will we monitor and track? And, there's lots of software out there that can really help and support you to do that. Once again, so when, at what point do we escalate and take the problems up the channel and up the response framework? And then what are your reporting frameworks and processes? What are you actually going to do to report back and sort of answer the questions of management if and when something like this happens? And although large numbers of organisations have identified the need for a social service channel, less than 20% of businesses or organisations have successfully integrated social media into an existing service operation. And this research comes out of Fifth Quadrant Service Industry Technology Report of 2012. So their website is fabulous if you want some of this higher level stuff. A major reason for this is the lack of best practice surrounding the use of social service and development of effective social media risk strategies. And so that really comes down to fear. But, there's lots of ways around it, and there are good people, there are good organisations that can help you move forward with that. So we know that Fifth Quadrant has exhaustively researched the global consumer market and service industry with regard to social media customer service demand and the successful deployment of that. So based on this research and the validation of best practice, they've developed a model for the design and implementation of social media strategy. And Fifth Quadrant called this social serve, and that's all one word. Gavin, if you want to get that down, that's social serve. And the key initiatives that Fifth Quadrant look at as part of a social service strategy include social media strategic plan and channel alignment. And this is the sort of thing that I think that you need to be doing, whether you use a consultant or not. You need to be thinking in terms of these high-level strategy. So the first one is social media strategic plan and channel alignment. And we're under these headings. I know that you'll be able to put a lot of this together yourself. Social media process design. We look at risk assessment and crisis management planning, technology enablement, including knowledge management, human resource management for social media, and that's massive, and that really goes to that risk management. And of course, social media metrics and reporting, because you need to be thinking about what's our return. Are we cost saving, or are we driving revenues? So get really clear on that. And certainly with all my experience in the commercial world, the ROI is becoming the million-dollar question, and it will be exactly the same. And I would say it's probably more about cost savings rather than revenue raising. So, have we got any more questions that have come in?
Yep. We had, if a business comes across as formal than relaxed, do you think that utilising social media will take away from their face, if that makes sense?
So could you just repeat, a formal voice versus a relaxed voice?
Yes, if a business comes across as formal, I'm guessing more formal than relaxed, do you think that utilising social media will take away from their face? I'm guessing she's asking, if they're a formal company, will social media make them look too relaxed?
Well, I think it comes down to who your target audience is. When you're talking to top 500 companies and their executives, well then chances are being on Facebook with a photo of the staff Christmas party, or somebody receiving an award, may not be the right channel. But if you're talking about your CEO doing a social media, a YouTube video that speaks directly to the market and takes them some timely information that they really want, that's a very different message. So I think you've got to think about your market, your message, and your medium. Oh, damn, I think I need to write that down. The three M's, your market, your message, and your medium. So which are the right channels? So I hope that answers your question, because some businesses are naturally going to have a more formal voice than a relaxed voice. But think about your market first and foremost.
Yeah, we have another question. Do you have a recommendation of a software or a way of tracking comments about your organisation on different social media? Let's say we have 3 to 6 social media channels operating for our site, and we want to be able to respond to inquiries quickly.
Yeah, look, I think that you can, that's a great question, and I think that you can use something as simple as Hootsuite. So that's Hootsuite. Hootsuite, it's a social media dashboard where you can post from there, and you get alerts, and you can have information coming back in through. It really depends on what you want. There are very, very advanced and sophisticated systems such as Radian 6, which is literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, and interfaces with your customer service or your CRM. And that gives you the opportunity to respond, and then that information gets put into clients' files and all sorts of things. Or Hootsuite is anywhere from free to $5.99 a month, as in $5.99 a month, so affordable for every government budget. And and that can be really incredibly effective depending on the market. I believe Salesforce also have a monitoring tool, but you've got two ends of the spectrum, so it's really, once again, getting very clear on how much do you need those systems to interface with each other, and do you need to be tracking and sort of putting information about your social media back into the database, or is it really just about responding, in which case Hootsuite's fantastic. It's a fantastic tool, and I do know of, I think it was the department, I think it might have been National Parks. It wasn't National Parks, it was an organisation like that actually launched their social media strategy the day that Barry O'Farrell announced that we were going to start shooting feral animals in the national park. So you can only imagine what was happening in social media that day, and I'm sure it will make a great case study once it's written up. But they're using Hootsuite. And as I say, it's a free tool, and if you want a bit of extra functionality, it's $5.99. So have a look at those tools.
You can't beat that, you really can't.
No, absolutely. We love a bargain.
Yeah, we're done for questions at the moment.
Fantastic. Okay, so in summing up, that I think that social media is absolutely the elephant in the room that many organisations and enterprises are trying to ignore, or if they haven't ignored it, they're now kind of a bit stuck. They've started, and it's like, well, now what? Organisations who really think through and develop a comprehensive social service strategy and then tactically execute it will benefit from well-integrated social media channels in the following ways. I think the first thing that we look at is that you absolutely have an improved communication strategy and accessibility. So, as Gavin mentioned, I was recently on a tour with Peter Switzer and the CBA, and he said, fish where the fish are. And remember, given that more than 93% of homes have the internet and more than 60% of Australians use social media, it's an outstanding channel to connect with and reach your market and share your messages. The second thing that you would really benefit from is it can reduce your operating costs. Agents can engage with multiple customers at a time. You can divert customers from maybe more expensive channels such as phone or voice, and even written, to social. You can drive them back there, and people are willing to use it. They're proving that to us time and time again. The third point is innovation. Organisations who are able to show currency and share developments with their market as appropriate in real time are really seen to be current and in touch with what's going on in the marketplace. The fourth point is perception enhancement. An effective social media service channel has the capacity to really change the perceptions of the market when handled appropriately, efficiently and effectively. And I think that's what we're all looking for, efficiency and effectiveness in our organisations as key drivers. And number five, at the end of the day, we're also after improved client satisfaction levels. Governments come and go, and based on the perceptions of people, and constituents and customers want good customer service levels. So organisations who can identify and engage with dissatisfied customers, prior to them just it all getting out of hand, it's really important to do that. And there's a real transparency with social media, that people can see that you care and that you're engaging with your market. And we've got lots of little tips and tools that we look at to support doing that really well. So they're our 5 key takeaways. So I'd welcome you to connect with us if you want to through any of our social media. But I will just warn you that on our Facebook page, I put up a picture of my shoes that I'm wearing to some business awards tomorrow night. So if you go there expecting something really fancy and talking about government social media, you won't get it. You'll actually see Cinderella's slippers being...
But now we can see how many likes you're going to get on that picture.
That's right. But I'd really welcome the opportunity to connect with you, and if you do want to send me some feedback or you want to ask any other questions, please direct those to the Facebook page, because you can only imagine that I'm there a lot. And of course, if you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, then I'd welcome that too. So I can see we've got a couple of other questions coming in.
Now, does Meredith have or know of any escalation models we could look at? One that would clearly show when to respond to negative comments, when to pull offline and when to ignore?
That is a great question. Anne, you are very active in this forum. So that is a great question. And, I don't have any formal models, and certainly Fifth Quadrant would. And I can direct you to Max Kelly there if you want to come through me, and I'd be very happy to introduce you to them. I usually say that leave negative comments, and let's talk about it in terms of Facebook. Leave negative comments there unless they are spam or they use really bad language. Then I would delete them then. The thing to think about with something like Facebook is if somebody does leave a negative comment, that doesn't mean that your whole audience sees it. It doesn't go out to the other people's news feed. It is only on your page. And I think that often a negative comment is an opportunity for stellar customer service. And particularly if you respond to somebody using their name. So Meredith, I'm really sorry that was your experience. Would you please call in and we'll see what we can do, or you give them an answer. So sometimes the transparency of dealing with these kind of issues is very helpful. And quite often what we see is that the community comes to surround the organisation. So you know what, that's not the experience I had. Or sometimes it can snowball a bit, but you know what, I think a lot of it is about dealing with it as quickly as you possibly can and directing people to sometimes another channel to get support. If it goes on and on, then I would certainly be looking at hiding the post if it was getting out of hand. But generally what we find is that doesn't happen, and generally we find that if it's responded to quickly and people are given an alternative or given some opportunity to vent and then be addressed, that quite often that shuts it down.
Well, it's a very full answer. We don't seem to have any more questions, which means your presentation kind of answered everybody's questions.
Wow, okay. I find that hard to believe. I'm sure there are some of you sitting out there with more things that you need to know. But as I say, you're very welcome to come over to my Facebook page, Video Social Marketing, and leave any questions there, and I promise you that I will answer them sort of within a couple of hours.
Well, that's great. So if there's no more questions, I think I'd like to thank Meredith for that presentation. I think we've all learned a lot today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for joining today. We hope this webinar has provided you with all the necessary tools required to manage your social media needs. As discussed, upon completion of the exit survey, you will receive an email which will include a recording of the webinar and a copy of the presentation slides. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you at future webinars.